I think, one of the great gifts that I've been given in my life was growing up in a small town, and we really didn't have much of anything. And luckily, we didn't have a TV, so we did a lot of things on our own. We had to be creative, adaptive, and flexible with what was going on. And I spent a lot of time with my childhood friends. There was a lot of freedom back then and trust. We would get up in the morning and almost at dawn and ride our bicycles out in the country and build dams and build forts and things like that, and then come home at night, eat dinner, and then go out and play again, play dot the iceman, kick the can, and Andy over, and just things like that. We made up games, so there was a lot of internal connection that we had, and we went from season to season, from sport to sport. My brother was a fine high school athlete at Morton High School, and we were a small town, 4,000 people. And he played baseball, he played football, he played basketball, and he was like my idol. So I would follow him around. But as kids, we would go in the backyard and play baseball on our own. We'd play basketball during the basketball season. We'd go out in the streets and play baseball on the streets with, wiffle balls and things like that. We'd build forts. We just had a tremendous, childhood. And I would say that my childhood was very much shaped by my faith. I belonged to the Apostolic Christian Church in Morton, which was a distant relative of the Amish. So it's a very, very fundamental church. Men sat on one side of the church, the women on the other side of the church. And so it was very fundamental. And I was brought up with those tremendous fundamental Christian, values, which were very important to me. So faith was important to me. My family was important to me. Ironically, many of our relatives lived within blocks of one another. And when we'd have a birthday or something, all the relatives would come over. So family was very, very important to me. So this evolved into junior high and high school. And I wasn't a great athlete by any means, but I tried everything. And that's what you did with your friends. Hey, I played 2 years of football. And I wasn't any good, obviously. Look at my body. And I tell people this, I did win a varsity letter my sophomore year in football. And you know why? Because of Asiatic flu. We had a small squad anyway of about 20 some, athletes. We weren't very good. Asiatic flu hit, and our head football coach, Roger Tuttle, was out. Most of the team was out. The assistant coach, Mel Brote, was still coaching, and we were playing Chillicothe. It's IVC now. Lee Heiser, who was the right halfback, and that was my position. Lee Heiser was the right halfback. He gets hurt out there. And Mel Brote looks down the bench. Oh my God. I don't know what he said, but there was only one person left, me. So he had to put me in the game, and I got a chance to play. And I played and got a varsity letter just because of Asiatic flu and because there weren't many other athletes that were there. And so I played football 2 years. Actually, my sophomore year, I tore the ligaments in my ankle, and that was a good thing that happened to me. It helped me to get into the running career. I played 4 years of basketball. I loved basketball. I wasn't very good at that either. I was like the chaser. They didn't care if they lost me out there, so they'd put me out there and press and everything. And if I fouled out, so what? Didn't matter. But they would put me in those sorts of situations. I played 2 years of baseball and ran track at the same time. So I would practice, one of these sports, 4 times a week, different sports 4 times a week. The only way I ever got into a baseball game, because I couldn't hit, they'd let me run bases. But then I was in track, and I was primarily quarter miler. I thought I was fast, but you're going against really, really small towns, not much competition. I wasn't that fast, but I thought that was, I was probably better at a runner than anything else that I was doing, although I liked the other sports better than running. Anyway, and I liked basketball, like I said, but I wasn't that good at it. And at the end of my sophomore year in football, I tore the ligaments in my ankle, as I indicated, and I had a little bit of success in running on track. And I thought, and our basketball coach, and I like basketball, Fred Dickman, said, hey, you know what? I want to start a cross-country team to get you guys ready in the off season for basketball. So I started running cross country around Morton. We just had a big plot of land and it ran circles around there. And that was our cross country course. just around the fence line, and I ran cross country. Lo and behold, my junior year, the first year I ran cross country, I got 6th in the state of Illinois. I didn't know how I did that. So I thought the thing that I really liked the least, I'm the best at. And so I stayed with cross country. My senior year, I got 2nd in state in cross country to Weymouth Kirkland from New Trier. And then in track, I ended up luckily winning the state mile at the state championship. And I ran, I think at that time, it was the 5th best high school time run in the nation. And again, I had no experience. I didn't know what I was doing or anything like that. All I did is do quarters every day. And I started getting recruited. And I had a cousin that was out at Lawrence, Kansas. And he said, you ought to come out and look at Kansas. And my mother was from Harper, Kansas. So we went out to visit Kansas. And I met Bill Easton, who was the head track coach at Kansas. And they had, I think, won the national championship the year before. So 1960 or whatever, okay? And they won the national championship. And I was, by that time, I'd been recruited by a lot of different teams, and I just wanted to be left alone. I didn't want to be on the phone. I didn't want to be talking to people. I wanted to be out playing with my friends in the summer. And so I made up my mind I'm going to Kansas just to get the decision over with. In fact, there was one guy who was a wonderful guy. His name was Tom Botts from Missouri. And he would call me at least 2 or 3 times a week. And I just didn't want to talk. I wanted to, again, be out and play with my friends. And I told my mom, and I feel badly about this, so I'm admitting my guilt, but I told my mom, please, whenever the phone rings, I'm going to run outside. If it happens to be Tom Botts from Missouri, he was a wonderful guy, but tell him I'm not home, so you're not lying. So when the phone would ring, I'd run outside. And if it was Tom Botts, I wasn't home. And she didn't lie. But I visited University of Missouri. They were very, very nice to me. And, interesting, one thing I just popped into my head that I remember from University of Missouri in terms of recruiting, I got a letter from one of their athletes. It was a half miler. I can't remember his name at all, from Missouri. But he had been, I think he got 3rd in the state in Illinois the year before, something like that. And he said, I didn't understand the wisdom of his words. He said, Al, we'd love to have you come to Missouri, but he said this, you lose something when you leave your home state. I didn't understand that. And anyway, but I wanted to make my decision. I went to Kansas, beautiful school. Coach was a great, successful coach. Billy Mills was the senior captain of the cross-country team. Bill Dotson was a guy that was going to be sub 4-minute mile. They had a great team and everything. But I was a small-town guy, actually a small-town hick, very immature. I got homesick was one thing. And again, I played sport in junior high and before junior high and in high school because it was fun. I loved playing and being with my teammates. When I went to Kansas, I realized it was a whole nother level. And the coach there, Bill Easton, to his credit, he wanted to win. And I don't blame him. That's what a coach is supposed to do. But I realized it's a job and a business. And it was far different than what I had experienced philosophically. Again, admitting guilt. As freshmen, we didn't know what fartlek was. And he'd sent us out for a fartlek run. And that's when we got out of his sight. And we loved that because we got out of his sight. Upperclassmen taught us you go behind a fraternity house and you play basketball. I thought fartlek was basketball, but that's what I was doing. We were just playing and having fun. And anyway, I finally thought I'm losing my verve for running. It doesn't feel the same as high school. And I didn't understand why. And so I told my mom and dad, I said, I don't think I can survive at Kansas. And I was good. I won the Postal Big 8 championship at that time. And I think we won the Postal National Championship at that time. And as I recall, I think I was the Postal National Champion.
In those days in the NCAA system, freshmen could not compete in any varsity sport. So to have a competition, teams would compete in postal competitions, where schools would run on a track specific distances on a specific date and time. After you ran, you would mail your results to the other competing teams, and you would calculate the results when you had all the information from the other schools.
So I was running well, but I wasn't happy, and I was losing my enthusiasm for running. something inside of me was lost. And so I told my dad, I'm going to, I want to leave. I felt like a quitter. I felt like a loser. I felt like a deserter. I felt very bad. And I liked my teammates on the team, but I ended up going to talk to Bill Easton. I talked to him on a Friday afternoon, and he talked to me for 2 hours. I remember his words. He said, "This is the biggest mistake you've ever made in your life, and someday you will write me a letter telling me it's this big mistake." I never wrote that letter. He sent Billy Mills up to my room. Billy Mills ended up eventually in 1964 winning the Olympic 10,000 meter gold medal in Tokyo. Billy Mills, I consider, and will tell anybody, he's a guardian angel for me on earth. He sent Billy Mills up to my room to talk me out of leaving. And Billy Mills came up to me and he said, "You know, Al, I think you're making the right decision. If you feel this is what you should do it." And he reinforced my decision rather than throwing salt in the wound. He helped me to really think I made the right decision. But I did feel like I was quitting something that I had never done before. So I left Kansas, went back. It was between semesters. Went back to Morton. I was going to go to Bradley University. I talked to Jake Schoaf, who was the head coach there. They didn't have rooms at the time, so I didn't have a place really to stay other than staying at home. And I ended up getting a phone call from Leo Johnson from the University of Illinois, because my cousin, a traveling salesman, stopped in and told Leo Johnson, he said, "You know, Al Carius dropped out of Kansas, and he's looking for a place to go between semesters here." So Leo Johnson called me. I went down there, talked to him. And my dream as a young boy, I would listen to the radio and I listened to Illinois football games, and I'd Red Grange and all the great players. I'd listen to the basketball games, but I didn't know anything about Illinois, but it was our state university. So I went down and visited, and I was thrilled that I was recruited by Illinois and ended up going to the University of Illinois. So Leo Johnson was primarily a sprint coach, middle distance coach. Bill Coleman was a two-time Olympian in the steeplechase, broke the world record in the indoor 2-mile at Illinois, working on his doctorate for English. And he became my coach, and he really, really helped me a lot. Although we didn't have the steeplechase in the Big Ten at that time, I was introduced to it in some way by him, and he was really an inspiration for me. So I was really under a lot of different systems of training. I got to tell you this one story about systems of training. This is funny, because I had my Morton system of training, what I did in high school, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew that Roger Bannister ran quarters, so I'd run 6 to 8 quarters every day, every day, I didn't know what to do. And then I went to Kansas, and I learned this Kansas system of training and what they did, and they had their system, their pattern of what they did, and I learned about 20 quarters. I never heard anything like that, 20 repeat quarters. At Kansas was one of the workouts, and they had time trials and things like that. I learned a lot from Kansas. Then I went to Illinois, and I learned the Leo Johnson method of training. And Leo Johnson was still trying to search for a method of training himself. Leo Johnson's, the person that he geared everything around was a guy by the name of George Kerr. George Kerr was from Jamaica. He got the bronze medal in the Olympics, and whatever George wanted to do, that's what we did, So we would do George Kerr's workouts. This one week, this is funny to me. This one weekend, I can't remember the exact sequence. This one weekend, George Kerr went out, I'm saying, to the West Coast, and he got beat in the half mile or some race by a Mahoy Igloy coached athlete. Interval training, day after day after day, wear spikes every day, We came back, and we'd always meet in the basement of Huff Gymnasium at Illinois. We'd meet in there, and Leo Johnson would go on the chalkboard, chalk in those days, and draw up what we're doing. He said, "Now we're going to start doing interval training every day, and you wear your spikes every day." We did interval training every day for a while. A month or so later, George Kerr went out the East Coast, and he got beat by a Lydiard-coached athlete. And lo and behold, Leo brought us back in the basement at Huff Gymnasium, and he said, "We're going to go, and we're now going to do 100 miles a week." In the middle of the winter, we started going from Igloy to 100 miles a week, and I don't know that we ever hit 100 miles a week, but we're doing high mileage. And I remember, one of the guys in the team, because I had went from, at Illinois, I had gone from the Leo Johnson method to the Igloy method to the Lydiard method. And somebody said, does anybody know where George is running next week? Because Leo didn't really know exactly what to do when he was trying these different systems, but all the systems were successful. But what I came to realize is you must believe in the system of training that you're doing. So anyway, that was my background at Illinois and running there. And I enjoyed it because it was a time where you got an education, and I wanted to get an education. I wanted to be a teacher. And I ended up, really going into physiology. And I got to be a graduate assistant for Leo Johnson. And he let me be in charge of distance runners because that wasn't his real specialty. And he let me work with the distance runners as a graduate assistant. And then when he retired, I worked with Bob Wright, and he let me take over the distance, runners and work with them. But I really wanted to be a teacher. And while I was there in graduate school, I was working for a guy by the name of T.K. Curitin, who was a great physiologist at Illinois. And I was working for him in the summer. It's all about education of the physical. He explained all of athletic performance by the physical, by what you do, the training. He explained how Roger Bannister broke 4 minutes a mile because of red blood cells, capillary stroke volume, the heart, VO2 max, all these things. He didn't talk about psychology. There was no such thing as psychology of sport at that time. And so I had him as a mentor. I got called by Sheldon Fordham, who was the athletic director and head of the physical education department at University of Illinois Chicago Circle campus. And I was in charge at Illinois my last year in graduate school of the Foundations of Physical Education program. All incoming freshman boys, men, had to take this course. And there was a lecture portion of it. I didn't have anything to do with the lecture. But then there was a laboratory. In the laboratory, they did all kinds of physical fitness testing, while they were there. And so I was in charge of the labs. And Sheldon Fordham called me. He said, I want you to come to University of Illinois Chicago Circle campus and develop this Foundations of Physical Education program at our school. And I had a verbal agreement to do that. But I was always intimidated by Chicago, still am. It's too big for me. I'm a small town hick. I'm just small town. I like small. It's one of the reasons that I was attracted to North Central College. I was at my dad's Dairy Queen downtown Morton and got a phone call from Bob Wright, who I was working for at Illinois at the time. He said, hey, a school by the name of North Central College called. This was in 1966. They called and they're looking for a track coach. They just lost the track and cross country coach. Would you be interested? I said, I've never heard of North Central College. But for some reason, thankfully, I agreed I'll go up and look at it. I came up. It was a small town. It was 16,000 people. I met the president and I said, I want to keep on running because my dream was to be an Olympian. And I thought I wanted to be close to Chicago. I don't want to live in Chicago, but I wanted to run for University of Chicago Track Club and Ted Hayden. And he said, you can continue to run on the team, but we'd like you to be here. And I thought, man, I got the best of both worlds. I can run and I can coach, but I wanted to be a teacher and I wanted to get my PhD. And I evolved into coaching. So people don't know I was really a teacher, but evolved into being a coach. But I loved teaching very, very much. And so I came here and became track and cross country coach at North Central College. So that's kind of the path that got me here. And I continued to run with University of Chicago Track Club.